Wednesday, the 10th of May 2017, a small suburb in a quiet area. At 15:30, the last lesson ended at the municipal school on Church Lane. 16-year-old James Walsh left the building through the main entrance and set off on his usual way home. From school to his house was a little more than half a kilometer as the crow flies. James covered this distance daily in exactly 8 minutes. He always arrived at exactly the same time, at 15:38. But that day, something went wrong. At 15:42, a surveillance camera at a shop captured James for the last time. He walked past the shop window, turned the corner, and disappeared. The strange thing was that the next camera, installed at the intersection of Church Lane only 100 meters from the shop, no longer recorded James. The camera was functioning perfectly, as a later check confirmed. What happened in the 2 minutes when James disappeared from the field of view of the first camera and did not appear on the second became the central mystery of this case. Around 16 o'clock, 50 meters from the Walsh house, police found James's notebook. The notebook was empty, without any entries. The cover was wet. At 15:50, it had begun to rain lightly. This meant that James had not reached his home, and the notebook had not immediately landed on the asphalt. James's mother, Margaret Walsh, reacted to the disappearance strangely quickly. She filed a missing person report with the police at 16:05, only 23 minutes after her son was last captured by the camera at the shop. In such cases, parents normally wait several hours before panicking. Why hadn't Margaret waited? The neighbor, Mary Price, shared an important detail with the police. 10 minutes before James's object was found, a white van without license plates stood in front of the Walsh house. No one had recognized the driver. The police began with the most obvious lead, a person who had only recently appeared in the area. This was Daniel Burke, a former prisoner who had settled on the outskirts of the small town after his release from prison. He worked as an occasional laborer, repaired houses, and often used an old white van, almost exactly like the one the neighbor had seen. Daniel quickly came under the scrutiny of law enforcement. The investigators also pursued a second theory. An unknown driver who had no connection to Burke might have been behind the wheel of the white van. However, there were no witnesses yet who could have confirmed or refuted this theory. Police found Daniel Burke's van near his makeshift accommodation at an abandoned campground on the outskirts of town. Based on an official search warrant, police confiscated and thoroughly examined the vehicle. Inside were an army rope and a pair of work gloves. The rope aroused suspicion, but there was no direct evidence against Burke yet. That same evening, police received a video recording from a supermarket parking lot. The footage showed Burke's white van standing there at 15:40. The parking lot was 2 kilometers away from Church Lane. At the time James disappeared from his route, Burke's van could not physically have been near the Walsh house. This partially exonerated the former prisoner, but did not yet provide him with a complete alibi. The investigation stalled. The case took an unexpected, ambiguous turn. 2 days after James Walsh's disappearance, police still had no clarity in the case. The investigators' attention focused on the person Daniel Burke, the former prisoner who had recently settled in the area and immediately come under suspicion. Despite his confirmed alibi, police decided to examine his biography more closely and check every detail of his life before finally removing him from the list of suspects. First, officers conducted a renewed interrogation. When asked why he was in this area and what he had done on the day of James's disappearance, Burke answered without hesitation. Between 15:30 and 16 o'clock, he had been repairing the roof of the Black Boar pub, which was located about 2 kilometers from the Walsh house. This was easy to verify. Police obtained a video recording from the camera at the pub's entrance. The time on the recording matched Burke's statement. In the images from 15:37 to 15:55, Daniel Burke was clearly visible working on the building's roof. The pub owner confirmed this information and presented a signed work certificate. Doubts about the suspect's words began to fade, but one more possibility remained. Could Burke have traveled the 2 kilometers to the Walsh house unnoticed and returned to work? Police gained access to data from the insurance company that had installed a GPS tracker to monitor trips in Burke's van. This technology was already widespread in 2017 and was actively used by companies to control service vehicles. The GPS data matched completely with the video recording. The van had not moved from 1520 to 1610, which meant that Burke could not physically have covered the necessary distance there and back in such a short time. Burke's alibi had factually become indisputable. But there was still one question that raised doubts among the investigators. When examining the van, police had found an army rope. Given Burke's criminal past, the presence of such an object seemed suspicious. However, he explained this very simply and calmly. He had been involved in sport climbing already during his imprisonment. At first, the police officers took this statement skeptically, but upon verification they actually found confirming photos and archive records of prison climbing competitions. The rope was sports equipment. This detail finally struck the rope from the list of suspicious evidence. However, a new lead emerged for the investigators that required explanation. The police officers looked at the recording from the supermarket parking lot showing the white van once more carefully. Now that Burke's alibi was finally confirmed, the detectives wanted to make sure that Daniel himself was behind the wheel of the van. The video recording was clear, and the investigators could recognize a man who got out of the van at 1542. The man in the recording resembled Daniel Burke in no way. Different height, different build, a completely different way of moving. The man was visibly nervous, looked around and then left the parking lot on foot, leaving the van standing there until evening. An unknown driver had appeared. This fact immediately troubled the police. Who did the van belong to then, if it was far away from Burke at the time of James's disappearance? The detectives decided to pursue this line of investigation and exclude Burke as a direct perpetrator for the time being. Burke was released under the condition of not leaving the city, but the police were not yet ready to completely remove him from their circle of interest. His personality, his criminal past, and his presence in the area were and remained a reason for police vigilance. In the meantime, the investigators decided to expand the search radius. The unknown driver now became the central figure of a new investigation phase, and the police officers began seriously considering whether they had overlooked an important detail in James's environment. Daniel Burke retreated into the background. The investigations concentrated on what seemed impossible: James Walsh's close environment. The detective's gaze returned to the house on Church Lane where Margaret Walsh lived. Her unusually quick reaction to her son's disappearance now required careful examination. The police detectives began checking the family's bank accounts. The examination of an account statement obtained through an official online request brought an unexpected result. In January of the same year, Margaret had transferred a rather high sum, about £4,800, to the account of a private construction company that dealt with minor repairs in residential spaces. For a family with modest income, this sum was considerable. There had been no previous mentions of such renovation in the Walsh house. This aroused suspicion among the investigators and the need to question the contractor. Simultaneously, the police spoke with the priest of the local saint, Patrick's church, which the family regularly attended on Sundays. Another strange detail came to light. 1 month before James's disappearance, Margaret Walsh had asked him for the keys to the church storage room. She claimed she needed them for charitable purposes, but the church received no reports of such events or donations from the family. The keys were returned after a few days, but the priest noticed no activity in the storage room. The purpose for which the keys were borrowed remained unknown. The investigators suspected that Margaret might be preparing a hiding place or secret room in her own house. To confirm or refute this version, the police turned directly to the owner of the construction company who had received the money transfer. The contractor confirmed that he had indeed performed work in the Walsh house. His statement contained dry, technical details. The renovation was commissioned for a small chamber in the basement of the house. The contractor explained that the client had insisted on complete soundproofing of the room, installation of an additional lock on the door and reinforcement of the walls. Margaret had personally supervised the work progress and paid for the entire renovation in cash. The contractor also presented photos of the process, workers drilling walls and installing soundproofing panels. Why such strong soundproofing was required, Margaret did not explain to him, and he did not consider it necessary to ask questions. Thus, the police received confirmation that the secret renovation had actually taken place. Margaret had obviously hidden it from neighbors and acquaintances and tried not to attract unnecessary attention. Against this background, an alternative version emerged. One of the investigators expressed the assumption that James might have disappeared consciously at his mother's request. The reason for such a scenario could have been the family's debts, court proceedings, and property disputes after the divorce between Margaret and her ex-husband, James's father. It was suspected that Margaret might have hidden James in a safe place to gain an advantage in the custody dispute by presenting her son as missing. The investigators began checking this hypothesis. However, it turned out almost immediately that in the 4 days since the disappearance, no money movements or attempts to leave the city had been undertaken. James had appeared nowhere, had made no contact with friends, used no bank cards, and had not contacted his mother. The version of voluntary disappearance became less convincing with each hour of verification. The final decision to return to Margaret's house and examine the basement more thoroughly was made on the morning of the 14th of May. When examining the basement room, a forensic technician noticed a wall in the rear part of the chamber. The surface looked suspiciously fresh and smooth and differed significantly from the other walls in the basement. The forensics experts carefully checked the plaster layer. Underneath, they discovered a cavity, a niche about 55 by 90 centimeters in size, carefully camouflaged and sealed with a new layer of building material. The contents of the niche had not yet been opened as special permission was awaited, but it was already obvious that something had clearly been inside it before. This was indicated by numerous scratches on the inner walls of the niche that resembled traces of fingernails or other objects with which attempts had been made to damage the surface from inside. The nature of the traces suggested coercion rather than voluntary stay. This discovery dramatically changed the course of the investigation and prompted the investigators to take even more decisive measures. While the forensic technicians secured the found traces, the police prepared the questioning of Margaret and other family members to understand who else could have known about this room and for what purposes it was intended. There were fewer and fewer reasons to believe that James' disappearance was voluntary. The main task now consisted of clarifying the fate of whoever might have been in the camouflaged niche. Margaret herself behaved calmly and coolly during the basement examination and showed no emotions. The police had been carefully documenting every detail of the mysterious basement in Margaret Walsh's house for several days already. The wall with the camouflaged niche became the most important point of the investigation. It was obvious that the family's secrets ran deeper than even the most experienced detectives had suspected. After clarifying all formalities, it was decided to completely break through the wall. Under the thin plaster layer that concealed the niche, a narrow corridor about 4 meters long was discovered. The space was stuffy and dimly lit. At the end of this corridor, the police saw a heavy steel door equipped with a massive bolt from the inside. The fact that the door's lock was on the inside confused the investigators. This could have meant that the person staying there could control their stay themselves. But soon the forensic technicians noticed a crucial detail. A metal bracket was attached to the outside of the door that restricted its movement. This detail completely ruled out voluntary stay in the room. Meanwhile, a new witness came forward whose testimony could become an important element in the investigation. It was courier Amar Choudhury, who contacted the police on his own after hearing details about James's disappearance in the news. Amar told that on the evening of the 16th of May, he brought a food order to the back entrance of the house on Church Lane. According to his words, while waiting at the door, he heard from inside the house the quiet voice of a teenager asking for water. The courier claimed he knocked again, but only Margaret Walsh opened the door, quickly and wordlessly took the order and immediately closed the door again. But soon, Amar began doubting his own words. Already during the second questioning conducted by the detectives a few hours later, the courier expressed doubts and suspected that the sound could have come from the television or radio. This confusion forced the police to spend additional time checking all sound sources in the house. Despite the uncertainty in the courier's testimony, his original statement prompted the investigators to accelerate the examination of the discovered hiding place. On the evening of the 18th of May, after hours of preparation, the forensic technicians began opening the heavy steel door at the end of the narrow corridor. Under police supervision, after unsuccessful attempts to open the door in other ways, it was decided to break open the locking mechanism. The door yielded only with difficulty, and behind it they found the living James. The 16-year-old James was emaciated, appeared disoriented and extremely weakened, but was able to answer some of the detectives' questions with a whisper. He lay on a thin mattress directly on the concrete floor. The interior was narrow and gloomy. On the floor around him lay strange objects that obviously had ceremonial significance. An open Bible, 2 candles, golden rings and neatly placed cloth ribbons beside them. James did not explain the purpose of these objects, but only repeated the same sentence in a quiet voice. Mama said it must be so. Despite the obvious exhaustion and signs of a long stay in complete isolation, James was alive and not in immediate danger. He was quickly handed over to doctors who were waiting nearby. Meanwhile, the police began documenting and carefully examining the entire contents of the room. The open Bible was marked with a ribbon on a page with a section from the Old Testament about covenant and promises. The candles were half burned down, indicating their use over several days. The rings looked new and unused, but their presence suggested something more complex than simple imprisonment. The police suspected that the found objects could indicate a ritual or ceremony that was supposed to take place but was not completed to the end. The investigations had to change direction at this moment. The obvious imprisonment of the teenager and his physical condition left no doubt that Margaret's actions were clearly illegal. Margaret Walsh was immediately arrested for further questioning. During this time, the neighbors of the house on Church Lane began actively speaking with police officers and confirming that they had noticed strange behavior from the Walsh family in recent months. Late nighttime arrivals of unknown cars, muffled voices and whispers, sounds of muffled singing that came from the house at unusual times. These details strengthened police suspicion that the motive for the crime was far more complicated than it initially seemed. But despite the obvious progress in the case, police did not forget the original puzzle of the white delivery van. The identity of the unknown driver captured by the supermarket camera was still unclear. The investigators intended to bring all threads together and find out exactly how this man might be connected to the secret that the Walsh family was hiding. Now the police faced the difficult task of understanding the true meaning of what had happened in the house on Church Lane. The investigators prepared for the possibility that this case might reveal far darker and deeper secrets than those visible on the surface. The perpetrator was Margaret Walsh, James's mother. In court, she fully confessed her guilt and confirmed all details of the investigation. Her words sounded calm and clear, but icy silence reigned in the courtroom. Margaret told that the idea for the secret room came to her after her difficult divorce. She was afraid of losing her son, whom she considered the only close person who remained with her after the separation from her husband. Through regular church visits and attempts to find comfort in faith, Margaret increasingly distorted religious concepts over time and replaced them with personal fears and obsessive thoughts. At some point, she believed that the only way to keep her son with her forever was to perform a special ceremony that she had invented herself and noted in her diary. Police confiscated Margaret Walsh's personal diary on the morning of the 19th of May. The diary was filled with neat entries, among which her words could be clearly read. "Only a covenant will protect us forever." This sentence was underlined several times. Next to it were dates and notes about necessary preparations. The investigators determined that Margaret had prepared for this in advance, and the ceremony was not accidental, but a carefully planned event. Receipts from online shops also played a role in the case. paid through the popular MetPay system. The receipts showed golden rings and a lace tablecloth that had been ordered several weeks before James's disappearance. This fact clearly indicated that the ritual was planned with special care and long in advance. Finally, the identity of the mysterious driver of the white delivery van captured by cameras near the supermarket was also clarified. It turned out to be a simple hired worker who regularly delivered building materials and furniture for private orders. The driver had been engaged by Margaret through an advertisement published on the internet. Payment was made exclusively in cash. All details of the business were found by investigators in the WhatsApp chat history, which police officially obtained as part of the investigation. Additionally, a check of church records and parish protocols was conducted. Despite her regular visits, the pastor had no idea what Margaret was planning. It turned out that she had made a copy of the church keys without his knowledge. There was no evidence of her intentions or actions with the pastor or parish members. The final court hearing took place in December 2017. At this time, James was physically completely recovered, but his emotional state required, as psychologists confirmed, continued serious observation. In the courtroom, Margaret maintained a cold distance and seemed almost indifferent. When the judge read the complete version of what happened, many in the courtroom looked away. At the moment of the verdict announcement, Margaret suddenly turned to James and tried to speak with him, muttering some incomprehensible words and extending her hands toward him. James, who sat in the front row next to his father and a psychologist, turned away from his mother without saying a word. This gesture was the final point after which Margaret finally showed signs of dejection and was forced to silence. The verdict was strict and unambiguous. The court sentenced Margaret Walsh to 15 years imprisonment and emphasized the special cruelty and careful preparation of the crime. Additionally, it was established that after the first 3 years of imprisonment in a general prison, she should be transferred to a medium-security psychiatric institution to receive mandatory treatment. After the verdict announcement, James Walsh left the courtroom accompanied by his father and a psychologist. At the exit, he did not speak with journalists, remained silent, and appeared tired. Despite the conclusion of the court proceedings, many details of this story remained the subject of discussions among experts and the public. Some described Margaret's actions as the result of deep mental disorder and fanatical distortion of religious concepts. Others leaned toward the version of manipulative behavior and conscious revenge on the former spouse. Despite all the details uncovered by investigators in the court, some questions remained officially unanswered and left an unpleasant aftertaste of uncertainty and discomfort. Nevertheless, the most important thing in this case was finally concluded. James was alive and returned to normal life, and the guilty party was punished according to law. In the small town where this crime occurred, the unusual events and circumstances of this case were discussed for a long time. The local church parish revised access rules to church premises, and neighbors became somewhat more attentive to each other, aware that evil itself can lurk behind the walls of a completely ordinary house. This was one of those rare cases in which justice not only punished the perpetrator but also uncovered important and terrible truths about what can sometimes hide behind the facade of quiet and peaceful life of an ordinary family. In the year 2017, events occurred in Japan that disturbed the public. The investigations that began after the discovery of a young woman's disappearance soon revealed a series of unexpected incidents. These events took place in the city of Yokohama in Kanagawa Prefecture and left a lasting impression in the region's history. At the center of this story is 23-year-old Tamura Aiko, who lived in the city of Waj. After her parents' divorce, she lived with her mother and dropped out of education after middle school. In May 2017, Tamura lost her mother, which deeply affected her. Since then, her mental health was at risk, and she was receiving treatment at a medical facility, which was important for her well-being. Meanwhile, her older brother supported her despite the geographical distance through social networks, sending messages with words of support and hope. The events that led to her disappearance filled her family with deep concern. Tamura, who was always a reserved person, became the central figure in these dramatic circumstances. Everything was going well, and the brother sensed that his sister's life was getting better. But in October 2017, she suddenly stopped responding. During his efforts to find her, several incidents became known that caused great sensation in Japan. The situation with Tamara and other victims became known throughout the country. This case achieved the status of one of the most mysterious. Let us imagine that the 23rd of October 2017 was a Monday, shrouded in silence, as there had been no news from Tamara for 3 days, which greatly worried her older brother. Concerned about her delicate health and her tendency towards spontaneous decisions, he began searching through her social media profiles, hoping to find some clues about her whereabouts there. On the 20th of September, after reading a recently received message, a man felt goosebumps. The thought of having to arrange an important meeting occupied him. Tamura left a message. "I want to leave. If you are ready to help me, let's meet in Tokyo. Do you have a car?" The one who responded wrote, "Are you using something calming? I have a secluded place to talk." Tamura's response, sent on the 21st of the following month, sounded desperate. "Can we do this today? I only have 1,000 yen. That will be enough. Where are you located? Are you a man or a woman?" Tamura's brother, reading these lines, worried about her well-being. He published a search notice, described the conversation partner, and asked the public for help. Since he could not find Tamura that day, he turned to the police. Immediately after receiving the information, investigators began a thorough investigation, which soon led to significant progress in the matter. Tamara was last seen on the 23rd of October at 1:45 in the afternoon at Wodge Station. She was accompanied by a young man, about 25 years old, with shoulder-length black hair and slim build. It turned out that they traveled from Wodge to Matilda Station and then further to Saturday May Station, which is located in a city far from Tamara's home. At 14 hours 4 minutes, they reached their destination. At 7 o'clock in the evening, both disappeared from the station. A new turn in the matter arose when a network user who had previously communicated with this young man left a message on Tamara's page and provided important information. At the end of October, at the intersection of Freedom and May Streets, a young woman arranged to meet with a person who had previously been identified in a video. Considering the risks, the police decided to prevent her participation in this meeting and sent a group of undercover investigators, including Tamura's brother, to this location. In the afternoon, a man matching the description appeared at the station and went to a nearby 2-story house located approximately 750 meters from the station, where investigators were already waiting for him. After going to his apartment on the upper floor, the man knocked on the door, and when it was opened, the investigators were met with a tense atmosphere. Tamura's brother spotted his sister's white bag inside. When asked about the young woman's whereabouts, the man silently pointed to the freezer, where the remains of his victims were later found, covered with an unknown material. The apartment was simply furnished, with a bathroom and kitchen to the left of the entrance and a small attic above. In the adjacent living room, boxes were found, the examination of which led to further unexpected discoveries. Many remains of people who had disappeared in the city were found in the freezer. When checking 8 boxes in the living room, disturbing finds were made in 7 of them. The 8th box was full of chaotic contents. The man was immediately arrested, and police forces immediately came to the location to begin the official investigation. The other boxes, except for one that required special caution, contained 249 parts with a sharp, unpleasant smell. In the bathroom, among personal belongings, tools for working with various materials, several pairs of shoes and leather accessories were found. A forensic examination confirmed the presence of 9 different objects. One of them belonged to a man. These events developed over the last 3 months, with the last incident taking place less than 2 weeks before the discovery. As soon as the news became known, a crowd gathered in front of the house, including numerous journalists, which forced the police to cordon off the area with a blue tarp. Neighbors, Questioned by investigators noted that they had not heard any unusual sounds, except for the noise of the nearby railway. Since a new resident moved into the second floor of an apartment building, residents noticed a strange smell. On the 9th of November 2017, 16 days after this event, investigators were able to identify 9 victims through DNA analysis. Among them was 21-year-old Laura Miyazaki, who worked in an office in Kagawa Prefecture, and 15-year-old student Hongsi Hara, as well as other young people aged 17 to 26 years. Some of them had psychological difficulties. These events triggered a wave of discussions in society and raised questions about how such a thing could remain undiscovered for so long. It soon became clear that Hiroshi, born in October 1990 in the city of Zama, was a central figure in these events. He was 27 years old, did not work, and lived about 3 kilometers from his parents' house in the same city. His life path was complicated and full of challenges, which shaped his further life course. The Takahashi family, consisting of parents and a younger sister, seemed quite normal. The father worked in auto parts trade, and the mother took care of the household. But behind this facade, major problems were hidden. Hiro was selfish from an early age and paid no attention to other people's feelings. At school, he was withdrawn and barely visible in photos. The family conflict ended with the parents' divorce, and Hiro stayed with his father. During this time, he often skipped classes and worked to become more independent. He experienced great difficulties and tried to cope with his inner problems by communicating with people in similar situations. Later, the man found work at a company that manufactures electronics. At the same time, he began to engage with the dark sides of life and meet questionable people. In August 2012, at the age of 22, Hiro went to the famous Tokyo district of Kabukicho, known for its adult entertainment opportunities. There he found work selecting women for a local club. Hiro earned well, up to 300,000 yen, about $2,000, including bonuses and commissions. Despite the good income, he could not save money due to his wasteful lifestyle. In February 2017, a turning point occurred. Hiro was arrested in Kabukicho, leading to a conviction of 14 months on probation with a 3-year probationary period. During his internship, he worked for a while at a logistics company and then returned to his hometown in Kanagawa Prefecture. Once home, Takakura began to lead a reclusive life, spending his days in a dark room and immersing himself in the virtual world. In Japanese culture, such withdrawals are not uncommon and are often associated with societal pressure. Unfortunately, Japan is among the countries with the most tragic cases related to ending one's life, with about 70 such incidents happening daily worldwide. Takakura made extensive use of the internet discussing difficult topics such as ending one's life. He created 5 accounts on social networks, 1 for open discussions and 4 for personal contacts. He skillfully managed these accounts, trying to establish contact with people in difficult life situations. Thus began his path, which led to sad consequences as he exploited the vulnerability of those who were desperate. In the hot summer month of August 2017, fate brought 27-year-old unemployed Hiroshi Risi and a 21-year-old office worker together through a social network. Miss Kuki, who experienced many difficulties and insults at school, suffered from adjustment disorders and often found solace in the gloomy corners of the internet. It was there that she found people who shared her melancholic thoughts. This is how she met Hiro and another online friend, 20-year-old Tokugawa Inoki. The trio decided to meet in the park to talk about something terrible that I cannot discuss here on YouTube. However, Nisha Naki, who thought everything through, decided not to go down that path and start his life anew. Miss Kuki, disappointed by Nisha's decision, informed Hiro that she too would not pursue her plan. Over time, Hiro began to communicate frequently with Kuki over the internet. He noticed that she had a lot of savings and thought that she could represent not only a romantic, but also a financial opportunity. Hiro developed a cunning plan. He began to gather the necessary tools, including a saw and a rope, and rented an apartment near the train station. This apartment later became known as the location of his deeds. The apartment was practical and without prying eyes, making it an ideal place for his plans. Under the pretext of needing a deposit for the apartment, Hiro convinced Kuki to lend him 510,000 yen, which is about $3,500. 3 days after moving in, he arranged a meeting with her in this apartment. There, he put his plan into action, using the prepared rope. After the incident, Takakira dedicated 3 days to thoroughly cleaning all traces. When he noticed odors emerging, he placed everything in the refrigerator. At night, he discreetly disposed of the remains in nearby dumpsters. Due to this situation, he had to purchase boxes of ice and cat litter to hide everything. Hara was a reclusive girl who found joy in making new acquaintances online. In elementary school, she often argued with her mother about studying, and after a particularly fierce argument, she decided to leave home. It was precisely during this time, when she was vulnerable and spending time on social networks, that she met Takahiro. He acted according to his usual pattern. He invited her to his home, and there repeated the same actions as with his previous acquaintance. Her mysterious disappearance worried the families, who immediately informed the police. The investigation brought strange coincidences to light. The last signals from their phones were recorded near station Freiheit and Mai Street in the city of Zama. Despite a thorough search, the police found no clues. Takakira remained in his apartment and remained unsuspected. The story of 20-year-old Ugo Nishi took a sad turn. The symptoms of the young man with autism worsened after the painful breakup with his girlfriend, leading to his hospitalization. A meeting with his ex-girlfriend almost ended in tragedy, but luckily the worst was prevented. The situation at work only exacerbated his misery. Ugo, a worldly individual, tried to contact Takahira and they arranged a meeting. After this meeting, Ugo unexpectedly felt relief and even shared his decision to continue living with Takahira. However, Takahira, seeing a potential threat in him and fearing the police might become aware, acted quickly. He invited Ugo to his home under the pretense of a normal meeting and offered him a drink with additives. Unfortunately, Ugo met the same fate as the others before him. When there were already 3 victims in Takahira's apartment, the smell became unbearable. In a desperate attempt to get rid of the unpleasant odor, Takahira tried to eliminate the traces, but the smell continued to spread. The neighbors attributed the foul smell to nearby sewage problems and did not go into detail, unintentionally allowing Takahira to continue his actions. Continuing his actions, Takahiro did not stop at 3 incidents and carried on with his deeds. Soon, he found a girl online who, unaware of his dark side, moved into his apartment. His next victim was 19-year-old university student Sara Kichtenko, who suffered under the pressure of her mother. On the 15th of September 2017, Takahiro seized the moment when his girlfriend was not at home and invited Kichtenko over, where he repeated what he had done to his previous victims. Later, a 26-year-old divorced woman named Hitomi Fuji caught his attention. She was struggling due to her child's disability and unstable family circumstances. Her despair, expressed on a social network against the backdrop of her second divorce and a forced relocation, attracted Takahiro's attention. Their meeting took an unexpected turn when her ex-husband called, which could have disrupted all of Takahiro's plans. Takahiro acted quickly and did the same with her as with the others. To reduce odors, he developed a special ventilation system in his apartment. He acted similarly with 4 other people, harming a total of 9 individuals. The 9th box at the crime scene was empty and intended for the 10th victim, but thanks to the timely intervention of the police, further tragedies were prevented. The complexity of the case and the need for thorough evidence collection led to an almost 3-year delay in the court proceedings. Finally, on the 30th of September 2020, the hearings began in the Tokyo court, where Takahiro declared, "I regret what I have done and want to apologize to the families. But as for the others, I truly have no deep regret. "The only thing I regret is that I failed when I was caught," said Takahiro. His lawyer asked for leniency due to alleged mental problems. However, the court saw no reason for a reduced sentence and sentenced Takahiro to the harshest penalty on the 15th of December 2012. After the verdict was announced, the man's lawyers appealed, but after 3 days, Takahiro withdrew it. He explained this by saying that he did not want to impose an additional burden on his relatives with a prolonged court process. He also said that all charges against him were true, and he did not want to dispute the decision. A man was charged with a serious crime connected to causing harm and attempting to hide evidence. According to police reports, a meat grinder and a gas canister were found in the trunk of his car. The young man studied at college in Louisiana. The Knox County Sheriff described the crime scene as horrific. You can call it a frightening and very eerie place. What the investigators discovered inside was called a diabolical stew. Knoxville, Tennessee, November 2016. A loving family quietly celebrates Thanksgiving, not suspecting what would come. Joel and Lisa Guy were happy together. The people around them regarded them as true soulmates, and they had been married for more than 30 years. They invited their children to celebrate Thanksgiving in their family home. This very house was called a House of Horrors by police 2 days later. Joel Guy was born in the year 1955 and became a pipeline engineer. At the time of his meeting with his other half, Lisa, he already had 3 daughters from previous relationships. Soon after, the couple had a son, whom they named Joel in honor of his father. And to distinguish them, the son was called Joel Michael Jr. He was born in the year 1988 and was the only child of Joel and Lisa. Nevertheless, Joel Sr. and Lisa maintained close relationships with the 3 daughters from Joel's previous marriage, one of whom even called Lisa a caring mother to them all. She remembered that when she and her sister Michelle were 3 years old, their father met Lisa, and since then she became like a second mother to them. After 31 years of happy marriage, Joel Sr. wanted to retire and planned to sell their house in Knoxville, Tennessee. Joel and Lisa were very much looking forward to this time to be able to spend more time together. They bought a house in Tennessee where they wanted to spend the rest of their lives. This Thanksgiving was to be the last in their house in Knoxville before the move. One of Joel's daughters explained that they were very much looking forward to this event. The couple dreamed of retirement and simply enjoying life. It was to be a celebration of their life together as they prepared for a new chapter. But unfortunately, this chapter never came about. Let us go back to Thursday, the 24th of November 2016, on Thanksgiving. Joel Sr. and his wife had invited Joel's 3 daughters and their children, as well as their son Joel Jr. to the celebration. Normally, Joel Jr. was quiet and reserved, but his half-sister Michelle Tyler noticed that he behaved differently this time. She noted that Joel Jr. paid more attention to his sister's children, which he never did otherwise. Perhaps this Thanksgiving was something special, as it was the last in their family home. According to Michelle, this day was really different. The father and Lisa always joked and laughed together, but when Joel Jr. was there, he usually didn't participate in the conversation. But this time, Joel Jr. began talking to us as soon as guests were in the house. I'm not sure if he knew the children's names, but the fact that he spoke with them was unusual. No one suspected that this would be their last Thanksgiving together. After the celebration, Joel's 3 daughters drove away with their children, leaving Joel Sr. and Lisa Guy with Joel Jr. Although Joel Jr. had his own apartment in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, he stayed with his parents in their house in Knoxville, where he had his own bedroom. Joel Jr. had studied at Louisiana State University for several years, but dropped out in 2015 and hadn't worked since. He was dependent on his parents and financially unstable. On Saturday, the 26th of November 2016, 2 days after Thanksgiving, Lisa Guy went during the day to the local Walmart store to buy groceries. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, her son, Joel Jr., was seen in the same store buying bandages and chemicals. The next day, On Sunday, the 27th of November 2016, Joel Jr. left the house in Knoxville to seek medical help for problems with his hand and drove back to Baton Rouge to be treated at the student clinic. These actions in themselves aroused no suspicion, but on Monday, the 28th of November, Lisa Guy did not appear at work. Her boss, Jennifer White, began to worry. At the company where Lisa worked, a farewell party was being held, which she missed. Lisa answered neither the landline nor her mobile phone. Concerned for Lisa's safety, Jennifer called emergency services 911 and asked Knox County Police to check on them. The officer entrusted with checking the situation was Stephen Ballard. He went to the Guy family house, rang the doorbell, but no one opened. He walked around the house but encountered a locked gate and took no further steps. However, Lisa's supervisor remained concerned. 1 to 2 hours later, she again called emergency services 911 and asked for another check on the resident's health. Stephen Ballard went to the scene again, this time together with investigator Jeremy McCord. When they looked through the window, they noticed that food, including perishables like milk and bacon, was scattered on the floor. Although the house was for sale, there was no realtor's lock on the door. They also saw that there was no handle on the back door. Finally, Ballard and McCord entered the house through the garage door. When they were inside, they were immediately overwhelmed by great heat. That was the first warning sign that something was wrong in the house. According to Jeremy McCord, there were 3 boxes of beer and many perishable foods. He mentioned that this caused confusion for them, as they didn't know if someone needed help. Then Jeremy McCord said, "It was a strange situation. Normally, you know immediately what's going on when you encounter something, but here everything was different. When we went upstairs, the world turned 180 degrees. Everything was literally upside down. In the house, on the dining table, lay several firearms. The smell of chemicals was so strong that Ballard said the air caused unpleasant sensations on his skin. He also noticed that the temperature noticeably increased the further they went up the stairs. The officers, concerned about what was happening, began to fear the worst. Their fears were confirmed on the 2nd floor, where they encountered a terrible scene. At the end of the hallway were strange objects that aroused suspicion. Realizing they couldn't cope without support, the officers left the building. No living person was found in the house. Soon reinforcement arrived and investigators began their examination. They discovered a large pot on the stove that was still hot. Forensic specialists also found reddish-brown stains on the stairs, walls, and railing. The most disturbing discoveries awaited them in the bathroom, where 2 large blue barrels with unknown contents stood. In almost every room, chemicals and other objects as well as inexplicable burgundy traces were discovered. However, no evidence was found in the room of the 3rd resident, their son Joel Jr. Police monitored Joel Jr. As the only possible participant, he became the main suspect and was arrested on Tuesday, the 29th of November, in Baton Rouge. In the trunk of his car, they found a meat grinder and some chemicals. So what had happened to Lisa and J. Guy Sr.? It was obvious that a crime had been committed in their house, and the main suspect was their son. In the house, police found an important piece of evidence in a backpack, a black notebook that belonged to Joel Jr. This notebook contained checklists that detailed the equipment needed and the steps he had planned. Minimize the number of things I touched during the visit. Put on gloves and socks to avoid leaving finger and footprints. Throw something in the garbage disposal to destroy it. Place on the floor and repair. Clean up before she comes home. Bring blender and meat grinder. Grind the meat. The notebook titled Planned Actions Journal showed that Joel Jr. had thought about this event for several days or even weeks, starting from the 7th of November, almost 20 days before the incident. Surveillance footage showed how Joel Jr. bought items he later used, such as hydrogen peroxide. His browser history showed that he searched for various chemicals, like sodium carbonate, active ingredients, and the cleaning agent OxyClean. Joel's plan was to make everything look as if his father had done it. Joel Jr. wanted to eliminate traces and partially destroy the house to destroy evidence. He also noted the temperature in the house and planned to set the thermostat to maximum to destroy all evidence. When this evidence emerged, the sequence of events became clear. On Saturday, the 26th of November, Lisa went shopping and left her husband and Joel Jr. at home, who took advantage of the opportunity and went to the training room upstairs. Investigators noticed that the room was messy, which could indicate a struggle. Lisa came home around noon. She entered the house with groceries, not knowing what had happened in her absence. She possibly heard a noise from upstairs or noticed strange behavior from her son. She dropped the groceries and ran upstairs, but it was already too late, and she could do nothing. Joel Jr. continued his actions. He placed some evidence in a pot and left it on the turned-on stove. Meanwhile, something happened to his hand, and Joel Jr. left the house and drove to Walmart, where he was seen at 3:30 in the afternoon buying bandages, ointment, and cleaning supplies. It had been slightly more than 3 hours since Lisa had bought groceries for the family at Walmart. Now Joel Jr. was there. Through a sad coincidence of circumstances, Lisa's elderly mother needed medical help after learning about the incident. She could not come to her daughter's funeral. Lisa's brother explained in court that this was very hard for their mother. Learning that her own grandson was involved was truly devastating. With the approach of the trial, evidence against Joel Jr. increased, but he continued to deny his guilt. Witness statements from relatives and entries in Joel's notebook showed that his motives were financial in nature. Throughout his life, Joel Guy received financial support from his parents, and his mother Lisa worked tirelessly and gave a large part of her salary to her son. But as they approached retirement, the spouses decided that it was time for their 28-year-old son to live independently and planned to stop his financial support. Joel Jr. understood what was happening, and this made him angry when he realized that his parents would no longer support him. He devised a plan, hoping that if his parents disappeared, he could gain access to their $500,000 insurance policy. Additionally, Joel Jr. planned to use other parental assets as well, like their cars and yacht. For most people, such thoughts about their relatives are unthinkable. But Joel Jr. decided not only to act against those who loved and supported him most, but did so out of greed for money. Joel Sr.'s relatives testified in court and confirmed that he planned to withdraw financial support from his son. According to their statements, Joel Sr. wanted to give his son this news at Christmas, which the family wanted to celebrate in the new house if everything went according to plan. They wanted to talk with their son about it being time for him to pay his own bills and expenses. Then the prosecutor stepped forward, explaining that this was a very close family. She also noted that they liked to discuss their plans and that Lisa Guy, who loved and supported Joel Jr. most, probably told him about this decision in advance. This is confirmed by the fact that they discussed their plans with his older sisters in October and November. So the defendant knew about the upcoming changes and understood that once his mother retired and quit her job, he would lose access to insurance. And he was not ready to support himself and did not want to allow his parents to withdraw this support from him. Michelle Tyler, Joel Jr.'s half-sister, shared another disturbing detail. She said she had seen blue containers in Joel Jr.'s car during Thanksgiving celebrations, 2 days before the incident. Later, these containers were used by Joel Jr. to store evidence. On the second day of the court proceedings, on Tuesday the 29th of September, video footage was shown of Joel Jr. in a Walmart just hours after the incident, buying bandages and patches. Additionally, more photos and video materials from the house were presented to the court. In particular, a pot was shown that contained important evidence. Joel Jr.'s fingerprints were found on many objects in the house. Police officers appeared as witnesses and described their findings in detail. One of them noted that the smell in the house was so intense that he would never forget it. Throughout the entire court proceedings, Joel Jr. remained calm and showed no emotions. despite the incriminating statements from Knox County officials. Each new detail presented in court revealed increasingly darker sides of Joel's personality. On the third day of the court proceedings, another investigator described in detail how they collected evidence at the crime scene, including the use of previously purchased chemicals. Joel Jr.'s only friend and former roommate also testified before the jury. Michael, who had met Joel Jr. in school, had been his friend for almost 10 years. He described him as a socially awkward person who became increasingly withdrawn over time. The court also presented a phone conversation between them that was recorded after Joel Jr.'s arrest, in which Joel said that Michael was the only bright spot in his life. Joel Jr. listened to all the presented evidence and disturbing witness statements from relatives and friends. But only one moment brought him to express emotion during the trial: the meeting with his best friend in court. On the fourth day of the trial, on Thursday, the hearings began. Joel Guy Jr. waived the opportunity to testify, and the charges against him were read again. Finally, on Friday, the 2nd of October 2020, Joel Guy Jr. was found guilty on all charges. Among the charges were 2 counts of first-degree violation, 3 counts of more serious first-degree violation, and 2 counts of attempted evidence suppression. The court found Joel unanimously guilty on all 7 charges, and more than 700 pieces of evidence were presented. Joel Michael Guy Jr. is now in the Northwestern Correctional Complex in the state of Tennessee. His prison sentence is 124 years, and the right to early release will be granted to him on the 30th of April, 2136.